where you scream to watch that, watch this, and I'll dive down through this hairy flesh.
Hi, and welcome to Watch This. I'm CJ Johnson. In 2006, Clayton Jacobson and his brother Shane revolutionised the Australian film industry by giving Australian audiences a new character and a new actor that they could really relate to. That was Shane Jacobson playing Kenny in the film of the same name, directed by his brother Clayton. Clayton hasn't made a feature film since then, until now, with Brothers Nest, but he's been working on feature films and other films every single day of the week since then. That's his own words. He joins me on Watch This morning on the release of Brothers Nest around Australia. Hi Clayton, how are you?
Good, thank you. All I wanted was a quiet place to come and eat some of Auntie Shirl's ginger fluff cake. I didn't get to the third bite. Wallop.
So you've finally put out a second feature film, but you say to me before we started shooting that you've been working on feature films every single day.
Yeah, that's right. It's not easy making films in any country. It's a difficult thing. When Kenny was released, I remember meeting Fred Skepsey, and I'd worked with his kids on various projects before, and had known him. And I asked his advice. What do you suggest? He said, get 7 films up. I said, 7 films. I said, I've just spent 42 years trying to get 1, and he said, no, do 7. He said 4 will die of natural causes, 3 will get close, 2 will collapse, and there'll be 1 left that you can make. And he was pretty bang on. It didn't quite pan out that way, but he was pretty well right. So I've got about 7 to 10 projects that I've been working on that have either fallen over or it's a very common story.
I toured around with him on an afternoon and evening because then I was doing the Q&A for his film at the Sydney Film Festival a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he said the exact same thing. He said, like, literally, you've got to have like 9 or 10 always bubbling because they just die. And Bruce Beresford, I mean, all his books are about the same thing.
They're a great read. I so wish I had read his book a few years earlier.
Josh Hartnett definitely wants to do this?
Yeah, because it was just that thing of, every morning when your feet hits the ground, it's like, okay, well, another day of daydreaming and fantasizing about what may or may not be. But it was just great reading that book because it was like, oh, I'm not alone. This happens to really great filmmakers. It's not just my lot.
Yeah, and he's graduated to the point in his own maturity that he just is like, okay, that one's dead, and he just walks away.
Yeah, no, I think you have to. I think and also that we were talking before. It's that the timing. The world goes through shifts. It's I'm sure when September 11 hit, there were just thousands of filmmakers out there that just immediately knew, well, this hard-hitting, caustic American drama isn't going to happen.
Right.
My musical will, and my zombie movie that I thought about is probably going to come to life, because it was the first thing I thought of when that happened. I went, get ready for a lot of zombie movies and get ready for musicals. And that's exactly what happened, because you need some kind of counter to the general tone of the world,
Yeah, well, Brothers Nest, because it stars you and Shane as brothers, I assumed before I saw it that this was an original script either by you or him or both of you, but it's not exactly.
No. So it was Jamie Brown, Melbourne writer. He wrote The Mule and the Graham Kennedy story, and has worked on numerous other TV shows and what have you as sort of a writer. But he is an old friend, and we were working on a couple of projects, and he was at my house, and I live about 50 minutes north of Melbourne, and I'm slightly secluded on about 6 acres, and it's very. I always forget, but it's very common for city slickers to come up, and if they spend the night, they panic. They literally are convinced that they'll have their throat slit in the middle of the night, and no one will hear it. And he must have had that experience, and then he went away, and 6 months later he called and he said, "Look, I've got a script that I've written for you and your brother based on an evening and I had at your house." And I was very flattered. And then when I read it, the characters were actually Shane and Clay. And then I got about 20 minutes into the script. I went, oh, hang on, this is different. And it immediately was a page turner. I really loved the duality of it, the fact that the first half kind of feels like a two-hander.
Yeah.
It's almost a play. And then it sort of unravels into something entirely different. And then, of course, we went on our journey from that point on to sort of refine it. We brought another writer in, Chris Parlow, who also worked with Jamie, and then Shane and I had a crack at it, and then I did the final shooting draft.
You can't have bruises, no scuffs, no scratches. Right? A botched fake suicide is going to create much more suspicion than a murder. So, let's assume he's come in, freaked out, done a runner. We need to make it look like we were ice junkies. He came in, interrupted us, while we were robbing the place off our tits.
You can just say junkie. I don't think it matters what kind of junkie we are.
My big thing about it, my greatest feeling about it is the tone. I feel that you really had fun directing this.
Oh, yeah.
And being highly specific, using all the tools at your disposal about doing a particular type of film, which is, I guess, a modern noir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, what was great about it was the fact that I realised because it's so contained, I will have an enormous amount of autonomy over what I can and can't control.
Yep.
You know, so if you're doing a sprawling film where you're in 150 locations and you're on a low budget, you kind of have to make decisions based on the look of the film. There's no point going into a really highly stylized look because you are not going to be able to afford to adhere that to every location you go to. And I'm a big fan of colour palettes. I like, you know, working to very strict colour palettes because I think it just gives another worldness to it. And so I was excited because I went, it's a contained script, few actors, few locations. I can really get in there and paint all the walls and really give it a once over and give it a real look, both with production design, but also with all the visuals and also with the tone of performance and I love rhythmic dialogue. So in every aspect, it was great fun sort of working on it.
Yeah. Well, the shot we've got here is very emblematic of the tone, although I don't think this actually occurs in the film because it might be dark at this moment in the film. But this is sort of emblematic in terms of your colour palette and in terms of the feeling, which is very cold, very overcast. I mean, the film is mainly indoors, but even the exteriors. And to me, I instantly got Victoria in a way, as opposed to, for example, New South Wales or Queensland.
Yeah, and that was all, you know, that I was taking cues from the script with that. There was a lot of dialogue, a lot of you know, thick print in the first few pages about just how cold it was and how difficult it was for these boys to get to this property. They clearly, I think the description was that, you know, these two boys are the kind of boys whose doctors would be, very much suggesting that they don't take this journey on a bike, that they may not make it, and they may not make it, something to that effect. But yeah, so but it was, it was the nature of the location that we found. It's really it's near Bacchus Marsh in Victoria, and it's high country, and it was extremely cold. And when the morning mists are just beautiful, and there's a lovely tone. You can kind of see all the scorched grass and what have you. It's great.
Yeah, it feels very damp. I mean, as you can see, and all of this, and just the image of you guys arriving at that thing at the beginning, it really sets the mood incredibly well.
Yeah. No, it's look, it was. I think that we were just blessed with a really great location. I don't know if I would have been able to have as much control if we were, splitting it over, but everything was shot within a 1K radius, really.
So we won't spoil anything about the film because, as with any noir, it relies on twists and turns. But fair to say that it's about two brothers in young middle age who arrive at this property that kind of belongs to them with a nefarious purpose, and it follows their long day's journey into night when their nefarious purpose is going to come into effect.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm fine with sort of mentioning the fact that, you know, that they are plotting to murder a family member,
Right,
and
okay.
it's sort of. We set that out pretty early. The agenda is set pretty early on, and a lot of the first half of the film is them being in their family home, and either being affected by that reality of being back there, or the discourse about what has taken place in that house, and the manipulations between old and young brother. You know, the older brother is really unfortunately manipulating his position in the family hierarchy to his own benefit, and a lot of, and Shane plays the main character really, where all eyes sort of hopefully are watching his reaction to how this is all sort of unfolding.
Oh,
Mate, and you'll leave residue on the bowl.
what does that matter?
DNA.
Yeah, but, Jay, we grew up in this house. This place is riddled with our DNA.
Yeah, but old DNA, not new. There's a difference.
What? So, what if I want to take a shit?
Well, unless you want to poo in your hands and put it in your pocket, I suggest you hang on like a big boy.
So what were your cinematic influences? I mean, I've just got to throw out, I'm assuming that the Coen Brothers was mentioned once or twice.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely, because the thing that it's funny, I am a huge Coen Brothers fan. So the Coen Brothers influence was a rhythm and dialogue.
Yep.
So I love their dialogue. I love the rhythm of their dialogue. It's very sort of Shakespearean a lot of the time. There are great sort of patterns, and I did that even with Kenny. With Kenny, I often talked to Shane about the idea of up the hill, down the hill. So when Kenny was talking, his speech tones would always climb up to a certain point and stay there, and then they would come back down again. And it doesn't really matter what you're saying, as long as you're getting that kind of arc, that sort of drift. It gives you something to work with that's sort of musical.
Right.
And and also if you look at a lot of the Coen Brothers, as I have, if you look at a lot of the Coen Brothers scripts, there are these literally these sort of, they're almost mathematical patterns of lines of 6 words, 4 words, 6 words, 4 words, 6 words, 4 words, or 7 words, 3. And I don't think it's all. I don't think it's all planned out that way. It's just they love rhythm in.
Yeah, it's their rhythm.
Yeah, it's their rhythm. So that's something that I really admire. And I also the whole. In this case, we were shooting single camera, and knowing that I was going to be acting and directing. I wanted to have the room. I didn't want to do a lot of 2 shots. So I was sort of looking at the Roger Deakins sort of approach to having that camera. I wanted the audience to be in the middle, in between us a lot of the time, and just also that slow, pensive feel that they did so well, and particularly in the second series of Fargo. That was actually quite a good. But it was films like Rope. That was a film I watched. Straw Dogs.
Yep. Okay.
That was, but I didn't spend a lot of time referencing. Actually, No Country for Old Men was sort of a tone that I thought the sense of the humour in that film, and that was really a good pitch. That was a good meter for me.
Well, I thought of Blood Simple, but I thought mainly at the script stage in a way.
Yeah.
That sort of, criminals who aren't criminals getting involved with something, and it's sort of going wrong. But that's always been noir. I mean, that's even, Double Indemnity.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually didn't look at Blood Simple for this. I mean, films like Blue Ruin was a film that I know influenced Jamie, and we both loved that film. And even, is it The Green Room? The Green Room.
Yeah.
That's another film that I think is sort of in the same canon.
Yeah. So were you willing to push things like the lighting, etc., into a stylized area? Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what I kind of really liked.
Yeah, so colour palette's a big with me. So I had a chart of about 6 tones, and that was sent out to every heads of department, and basically I drove them all insane, saying, please don't let any other tones other than these enter the space. And the DOP, Peter Falk, and I spent a lot of time working on the different looks of the film. We actually attributed a time of day next to every scene.
I believe that, because to me, the advancement of the day is key to the experience of the film, because you've got to feel this relentless drive.
Yes. And the only thing we stayed away from is I didn't want any midday light.
Yep.
So we basically said, if there's going to be any exteriors, they either have to be sort of early morning, so sort of, just around noon, sort of and particularly where we were shooting, where it was sort of a low light, or late afternoon. But nothing around sort of 1, 2, or 3 o'clock. They were where the sun was really high. We're always looking for nice sort of modelled lighting, and then we had colour charts, and then we split the film's look into I think it was 5 key looks, and then attributed those to times of day, and then so we had then times of day marked up on every scene, so that every head of department could clearly know, okay, well, it's 6:45, and then they could look at the main lighting chart and go, okay, well, that falls within sort of look 2. So that, so it was a really great Because we had 5 weeks to, and we shot in sequence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we shot the whole film in sequence, and some of that was just pure fear and terror that I may not be able to pull off acting and directing, and that it would help. And also, just I thought it would actually, because the film was all set in one day, I thought you have a much greater sense of being able to control. It would actually be, just by the very virtue of a continuum, it would help feel that it was all shot over one day.
In that colour palette, and it's not giving anything away to say that you don orange jumpsuits, was that an invasion on that colour palette?
No, that was part of
Okay.
that was part of the tone. There was a
Okay.
mustard tone, and then there was an orange. It was originally going to be like a blood red, and then just before we started filming, there was a Tasmanian film a short film I think that came out that had 2 killers in exactly the same outfits we were planning, and so I went, I don't really want to go down that same track. So we did a bit of a quick about face, and but no, it was definitely part of that colour chart.
It's a huge decision. Those jumpsuits are,
Yeah.
are massive in the frame.
Oh no, it is, and it's look. There was actually I embraced it for a couple of reasons. Knowing how busy I was going to be, I loved the fact that there was only 3 costume changes. This look at the beginning, then the orange suits, and then this look again at the end, and that it actually it fast tracked a lot of the filmmaking process, and also on a really kind of funny, almost pathetic level. Kenny is one of those outfits that people often wear to fancy dress. We get it a lot. And we were just sort of joking at the time that this is a particularly easy outfit to wear if you want to emulate the film further down the road.
Real marketing.
Always thinking ahead. No, but it was really born out of the fact that it was hard finding those suits, because what we discovered is all those kind of chemical biosuits make a hell of a noise, like I just did then when I hit this. They really do. So I knew that we would have trouble with sound. So we had to look high and wide for a suit that was of a fabric that wasn't actually going to make it sound like we had the loudest rustle track ever put on film.
So in terms of you working on the script and in terms of you shooting on the day, how did you ride the tone of black comedy and noir? Like, how did you decide where to stop being funny and when to be funny? And you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a question that's been asked a lot. What's interesting is I think the wheelhouse that I live in is kind of is this. I mean, there is a very...
It's like the darker stuff.
Well, yeah, in the sense that I think our family, we've always met tragedy head on with laughs, and we do have really strong gallows sort of humour. I mean, it's in our DNA. I mean, my grandparents were carny folk. My grandfather died when my dad was 8. My grandmother then sold up all the carnival and kept one of the tents, and then my uncles and auntie and my grandmother lived in this tent until my dad was 23 years of age, and they're sharing it with a Clydesdale horse in a paddock. And so they always used humour to sort of counter hard knocks, or tragedy for that matter. And I think it's also an intrinsically Australian thing. But there was a balance that had to be met. We were constantly asking that question of whether we were pushing the meter too far. And occasionally I did bracket takes to just be, an example is, Mother's wig. There's a point in that where her wig gets readjusted, and just the simple act of where that wig would sit could either tip the scene to a point where you wouldn't take anything beyond it seriously, or you could, or it's like that thing of if you're at a dinner party and you realise someone's got a wig and it's just creeped back a little bit, right? And they're telling you a really sad story about but you're sitting there going, that awkward sort of humour, that's the sweet spot of this movie. That's the sweet spot. Whereas if if you're sitting at a dinner table and the person's got a wing and it just falls right back here and they're unaware, well, then you're not going to be so worried about pinpointing it all, having a bit of a, because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a constant shift for us, is knowing how, and also Jamie Brown's very good with that too. He has a very, you know, The Mule was a particularly sort of, you know, dark comedy. So we both live in that one wheelhouse, you know. So yeah.
That was more of a comedy. I feel that this is ultimately more of a noir easily than even a black comedy. It's just got black comic elements, I suppose.
I can't help myself. I have to have I have to have a bit of a laugh with these things, but essentially. I do see this as a tragedy, you know, and like it's. I saw the characters as being. It's like a Greek tragedy. I think they're really tragic characters, and all of them are really struggling with their own take on validation and where that sits within the family unit. But I do think there's, when we were making this film, I was driving home and there was a report about a man who had convinced his son to burn down the family pizza shop. And the kid had done such a poor job of it. He burnt his hand and he burnt his thumb off. Oh, no. I don't know how you do that, but he did. And you laughed when I said that, right? And I found myself laughing hearing this report, but at the same time acutely aware of just how horrific that would have been at the time for not only the son and the father. Fire brigade find the thumb, give it to the cops fingerprint it, get the kid straight away, and he just gives his father up in a heartbeat. you know what I mean? And it's funny, but. It's that thing of tragedy plus time equals humour, but it is interesting when you actually compress them together. You do get this really fascinating tone. And I guess the sweet spot for me is that thing of, and I've watched it a lot with our screenings, people put their hand over their mouth while they're laughing.
Right, interesting.
They're a little embarrassed to laugh, but they kind of can't help themselves. And I think that's a good place to be.
And a lot of the stuff I don't remember us ever discussing. These other things, you got ice junkie rehearsal, electrocution.
Terry, look at me. As Dad would always say, failing to plan is planning to fail.
I know that, Jeff. It's just a little intense seeing it all written down like this. You've done it like a to-do list.
And it is true that, like, I mean, most people who, I suppose, set out to murder someone, they're doing it for the first and only time. You know what I mean? It's not like the criminal world is populated, you know, and 90% of criminals are professional. It's more like 1% of criminals are professional and 99% of people who do crimes are doing it because they feel like they have to and they're idiots at it. And also, they get caught.
And also it's domestic. I mean, so much of so many murders are actually domestic.
Yeah.
Within the family, you know. Sadly, you know, husbands killing wives and children, and we read about that a lot. And I think had these guys been brought up around a few more criminals, they might have done a better job of it. But they haven't. They are novices at this, and the older brother has gone to all the wrong places for to take his cues. You know, he's watching YouTube videos, and probably, you know, the Dummy's Guide to sort of murdering, you know, family members. I don't know, but he's well and truly out of his depth. But his own ego just won't allow him to admit it. You know.
Well, I've just got a bit of a meta question, since you have watched Audience Watch It, and you went to Sundance or South by Southwest?
Yeah, South by Southwest.
South by Southwest, yeah. So watching it there, and this is a very particular question because I know your brother well as a performer. I loved Kenny beyond belief. I saw it multiple times, and I've seen him on stage, do Guys and Dolls. You know, I've seen him in all sorts of things. I see you pop up as a performer occasionally. I guess I saw you pop up in Upgrade recently.
Yes.
Yeah. So I see you pop up. So I'm aware of you both as performers. But I sort of placed myself in the position of imagining if this film was from Iceland and I had never seen these two large, bearded, actual brothers playing brothers, the fact of the performers themselves would have been part of my fundamental enjoyment of the film.
Yes.
Because you two together in the frame are a unique double act. So did you sort of have that experience at South by Southwest? Were people kind of like, who are these guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, you were talking about references, and just as you were speaking there, I was reminded of Rams.
Yes, exactly what I was thinking of that movie.
So Rams was I actually got asked to pitch on a remake of that film, and I loved it.
Wow.
So this came along soon after it, and I was thinking of Rams. I thought Rams had a beautiful sense of humour to it, and that was very sort of dark as well. Nothing like this, but no, that was the interesting thing of going to South by Southwest, because they haven't come in with any kind of pre-baggage. The American audiences are generally very, very vocal with films, and so I was kind of really looking forward to. I've sat in on trailers where they all leap to their feet and applaud. And they really do.
Wow.
But they sat there stunned through this film. Like, I think we shocked the pants off them with this one. But yeah, a lot of the discourse in America was about how, but it's also they're used to brother teams.
Right.
There
That
are
is
a
a bit
lot.
true,
You know what I mean? Like, it's something they're used to seeing. So they kind of just picked up from that point of view. But it is the thing that I was looking forward to. I've always enjoyed watching, brothers, or particularly father-son when it's Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez in a film or something. I'm curious about that because you just know they are working. That when they go to those dark corners, they're talking about each other on some level. And we did that as well, and we gave each other permission to do that.
Yeah.
Shane's 7 years younger than me. When Kenny came out, I was very much the older brother. I mean, I'm the director. I wrote Kenny. And I was guiding him on how to be a celebrity.
Yeah.
What the hell do I know about that? So I was sort of, I was the cautious older brother, sort of, pushing him out into the wide world, and rightly so. There was a bit of pushback, and we had there was a period of time where eventually he said, "Clay, I'm 35 years old." You know what I mean? And it was the right thing to say, and we became immediately great mates after that. So when we came to doing this, I said, "Remember that period?" And he said, "Oh yeah, do I?" I said, "Well, use that. Let's go to those dark corners and let's put a Bunsen burner under them and really give it a cook."
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, it was good, and that's what I loved about doing this film with Shane is we did allow ourselves to go to those dark corners, and I am a step parent too, like I'm a stepfather. So
okay.
So there was elements of that I was. Talking to Kim about when we were making the film, because the original script was actually much darker. The two brothers they weren't particularly sympathetic on a lot of levels, and the stepfather turned out to be pretty much everything we were assuming that he was, and so I liked the idea of flipping that on its head and making him sympathetic when he rocked up. I mean, in many ways, one of the things I like about this film is the things you laugh at and the things that seem petty and of not great consequence in the first half end up being really important motivators and aspects in the second half. Things that you laugh at are kind of quite evil later on. And I like that. The pee bottle's a good example. So that's what I loved us going to those moments.
Mum.
You shut your mouth, Terry. I want to hear it from your brother. Did you have a good weekend, Jeffrey? Did you see everything you wanted, The Opera House and the Domain, Or did you do something else this weekend? Something close at home?
Now, of course, music plays a big part of the film, and you've gone with your composer for a very, very specific tone with the music, which is kind of elegiac and I guess works towards your concept of tragedy.
Well, it's Richard Pleasance. He was once in the band Boom Crash Opera. You would know his work from, like, he does the music to Wentworth, Sea Change, a lot of television, but he's also been my go-to guy for everything that I do, pretty much. He did the music on Kenny. He has a wonderful sensibility, and he has this incredible ability to really juice the emotion out of a scene without drawing too much attention to it. And he's also this. He's wonderful at just finding local talent that can bring something. So there's a particular sound in this film that comes from Jojo Rainwater Mitchell, who's a local up in Dalesford that he's made an album with, and he's an American of American Indian descent, and has this wonderful instrument that he's built himself that's kind of like a bow and arrow, but has this interesting sort of clanging sound that you hear through the film.
Yeah.
But Richard and I have a very similar attitude towards sound and music, which is I really do believe that 70% of the movie-going experience is sound. I think picture is information, and music and sound is basically the emotional signature of that information. There was a little experiment I used to do with film students that I really loved doing, and I still do from time to time, where you put together any 3 images, cut them together. Doesn't matter what they are, just some random action. The one I did was a friend entering the house, stops at a certain point, looks into the kitchen. I'm about to eat a biscuit. We have a moment where we look at each other, and he walks off. I then placed 20 different soundtracks to that piece, and then played it to the students and asked them to comment on what was different about each piece. Well, they went into great length about the different performances, the different tones, the different intent of the actors, without realizing, and even the different rhythms of the edit, the different rhythms of performance, not knowing that it was the same 3 shots, the same 3 edits. The only thing that had changed was the music. You know, Richard is very cognizant of that. But what I love about his music too is he is of that belief of not, of the music supporting and riding in such a position where it doesn't take over from the image. And as a result, very few people are aware of his great work, because it just sits like Kenny. A good deal of why people emoted with Kenny was Richard's music. And I don't think a lot of people also realise that all the incidental music was his as well. So when we're in Nashville and we walk into a pub and you can hear, that's him. So a lot of the bands you can hear, even the bands you can hear on the street sing, is actually Shane and I singing with American accents to Richard's music. The elevator music, the muzak, everything, it's all Richard. He's really very versatile and quite a talent.
You semi-funded this film by going to actual independent cinemas, first and foremost. Tell us just a little bit about this.
Well, getting back to where we started, I was working on a project that was my baby. I'd been on this thing for about 10 years, and it was the film I really had hoped to go straight into, and we were planning to. But it fell over at the last minute. And I seriously, 10 years after Kenny's success, was starting to wonder whether or not filmmaking was really the thing for me. Maybe, I started to look at other options, and I thought, no, it's in my blood. I can't shake it. And a good friend of mine, who was the sound designer on everything that I did, Craig Carter, said to me, "Why don't you go back to how you did Kenny? It was a very maverick sort of approach. You didn't have it. There was no industry that you were a part of then. It was just you and a camera and your brother. Go back to that. You've got enough friends that care about you that'll come on board and help, and I'm sure your brother will give you, at least 3 weeks to shoot it." So that was the initial spark when this script rocked up. It kind of like all the planets sort of all aligned. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we can do this for sort of $200,000, $300,000. And that's when Shane said, "Look, I'm in." So that was how it started. It was going to be shot at my own house on a very small scale. And I immediately started to think about what was most effective about making Kenny and getting it out there. And I realised a huge part of why the film worked was the work that we did with regional and independent cinemas. And the way they embraced the film and personalised the film, and literally they were at the coal front face dragging audiences in, literally. I mean, I heard so many reports of managers, dissuading audiences from one film into ours, and you so that was, and I've become friends with many of these cinema owners, and they still to this day talk about the Kenny experience, the fact that we brought him out there in character. So long story short, I thought, why don't we do that? But this time, let's go to them first. Let's not wait till the film's finished. Let's see if they're interested in getting on board from the outset and engage them. It is this bizarre thing to me. In this industry, there are a lot of, we spend our entire, as a filmmaker, all we're thinking about is the audience and how they will react to our work, and yet we almost never get to meet them.
Right.
And those that house the very facility for which the audience will come, there's almost no dialogue between the director and the cinema. So we set about changing that. And we went to the movie convention where a lot of these mums and dads, sort of cinema owners, all congregate once a year. And we pitched the idea and we said, you know, how would you like to get on board, put up a small advance? It was a very small advance we're asking for. And in lieu of us massaging and offering very specific marketing, talking directly to your patrons, meaning Shane and I doing pieces to camera during production, during during post, that can play in your cinema, that is us talking directly to your audience.
That's fantastic.
So we did a lot of that. So I mean, a lot of people haven't seen that stuff, but if you've lived in any of these regional areas where the film is playing, you've been watching Shane and I talk to you about this pending film and the relationship the cinema has with us right from the get-go. And so what happened was you basically got a situation where you've got cinemas being the first to dip their toe in, which gave us a release date, and it gave us the confidence to then go to talent, private investors, funding bodies to say, hey, regardless of what you feel of the film, we have a release date.
It's opening.
It's opening, and it was that thing of like, we've built this bus, it's leaving on the 21st of May, and there are spare seats if you want to come for the ride, and it just fast tracked everything. And so we were able to get this film from, I think we shocked even the cinemas, because we came back 1 year later to show the trailer of the finished film. And I know for a fact they didn't think we'd be back for another 4 years.
Yeah.
So,
oh, wow.
yeah. So we spun it all around about 16 months.
Well, that's a great story and a good news story.
It is,
Yeah.
it is.
Well, you're not a bloody troll. Turn some lights on, for God's sake. Yeah, I might be getting old, but I didn't notice your car in the driveway.
Yeah, I broke down.
How far away?
Only about a 15-minute walk or so, I'd say.
It's been a delight to have you on Watch This. I've
Thank
I've
you.
been fascinated to hear about your process. It's a terrific film. It's out in cinemas. Hopefully you're seeing this in time to go catch it at the cinemas, or maybe you're watching this at some later date, in which case you're curious about it on VOD. Download it, have a watch. It's terrific. Clayton Jacobson is the director and co-star of the film, and he's joined me on Watch This. Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
You don't have to be hard up to do bad shit for money.
000 emergency. Are you after police, fire, or an ambulance?
Yeah, all of them?